Let us welcome the fifth speaker. The fifth speaker is Ms. Sara Inoue.
Her speech title is Opening New Doors. Opening New Doors. So Ms. Inoue, please come up to the stage.
Thank you, Masters of Ceremonies and honorable judges. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. This is one of my favorite quotes by an American poet, Emily Dickinson. Last year, I spent a year in America studying at an Ivy League school called Brown University. Over the year, my biggest goal was to step out of my comfort zone and gain a new perspective on life. I was in search of my new doors. Today, I'm going to talk about one of my classes at Brown. The class was about homelessness. I saw many homeless people in Rhode Island, and I became curious how they had become homeless, how they had lost everything. In the U.S., homelessness emerged as a national issue in the 1930s when the Great Depression caused 2 million people to become homeless. In the 1970s, psychiatric hospitals were closed down, leaving many people with mental disorders on the streets. Today, there are over 500,000 homeless people in the United States and close to 5,000 in Rhode Island alone. It turns out that the homeless situation in Rhode Island is one of the worst in the entire United States. 40% of the homeless are female. 1 in 8 are children, 5 years or younger. I wanted to know who these people were. So, I decided to volunteer at a homeless winter shelter which provides food and beds for homeless people during cold winter nights. The shelter was called Hope. Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. My job at Hope was simple: opening doors. I was to let the homeless guests into the church basement, list their names in a notebook, and serve dinner provided by a local soup kitchen. The whole job only took about 30 minutes, and afterwards, I had 2 to 3 hours to simply talk with the homeless guests. In the beginning, the guests at the shelter never talked about their pasts. Instead, they would talk about their future on a beach in Costa Rica, or a visit to my home in Japan, or to sail away on their own boats. I felt sad listening to them talk about these seemingly unattainable goals. I felt like I was not helping them in any way. I was a privileged girl dropping into strangers' lives, and I felt like an outsider at the shelter. That went on for about 4 weeks. However, one day, I couldn't go to the shelter because I was sick. The following Tuesday, I returned and was shocked when a homeless lady who had previously only said hello to me came up and said, "Honey, where were you last week? We missed ya." This was the instant when a homeless person became a person with a name. Her name was Susan, and I realized that I was beginning to become accepted in this community. My new acquaintances started to talk about their pasts, how they had become homeless, or their life before that. Susan had been married with 2 children and an abusive husband, a husband who had often beat her, choked her, and once even ran her over with a car, leading her to become hospitalized for a month. Scared for her life, she had run away, but without a job or savings, she was forced to start living under a bridge. As I became closer to the women at the shelter, I was shocked to hear that many of them had similar experiences of abuse and rape before and during homelessness. Through my experience at Hope, I learned at least 3 things. First, mental disorders, traumatic experiences, and accidents force people into homelessness. Second, the lack of daily purpose is debilitating and discouraging. And third, although I used to believe that there was almost nothing that I could give to my homeless friends, I realized that sincere hugs show that I care. Simply listening show that I care. And I realized that I do care. Each guest was a child, a parent, a son, a daughter, a friend. Right before coming back to Japan on one of my last days at the shelter, we organized a Women's Day where the female guests could get a makeover. We invited professional hairdressers, nail artists, and masseuses. Susan got her hair cut, her nails done, and had a facial and body massage. She looked into the mirror, touched her hair, and started to cry. She hugged me and said, "I can't remember the last time I felt like this. I feel like a woman again." Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. My encounter with Susan and other members of Hope taught me another thing. They showed me how they use the support from the community to take on the challenges of each new day. There was nothing special about me that enabled me to help at the shelter. All I did was to become a part of that community. Any member of the society has the potential to help. Building this connection requires time, patience, and sincerity. But together, we did it. And I'm looking forward to going back to the U.S. next spring to continue with my volunteer work. For me, opening new doors into their world shed light on problems I hardly knew existed. It allowed me to help people who are too often overlooked by the society. But it also allowed their light to shine on me. We can all help. We simply have to open doors wide enough until we see the people behind them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Inoue.
Thank you.
Now we have a question and answer session. Mr. Hayashi, please.
Okay, Sarah. Emily Dixon's, is a worldly read for long years of times. Quotes.
Yes.
Emily Dickinson's is a widely read, and she left lots of nice quotes to us. Do you know any other quotes?
I actually have a huge quote book in my house, and she is definitely one of my favorite quotes. But my favorite one that I remember right now is a story about a bird. And in that quote, she says that there's a bird in our cage, and it chirps, but it doesn't go. You have to look into your heart and let the bird fly away. And that was the quote that encouraged me when I went to the U.S., and that was the quote that continues to encourage me, as well as this quote, to keep on trying and experimenting.
Thank you. There's some kind of quotes related to dogs. Dogs? Dogs are better than human because they know, but they don't tell. They're wiser than human beings.
That is a great quote.
Yes.
And I completely agree, because when I feel sad, when my mother gets angry at me, I hug my dog and I know that he is on my side.
But they never talk, right? Okay. Let's see. The last part of your speech, volunteer work. Can you tell us briefly what volunteer work to you, the meaning of it?
Yes. The reason why I love this class so much was because it was first a great class because it let us read so much about homeless people all over the world, like Romania, China, Russia, and the United States. But reading those books don't really tell you the reality of those people. For example, in Brown University, there's a street with many homeless people. But going down that street, I didn't understand what it means to be those people. And being in that volunteer work, in a sense, humanized the people that I saw behind the books and behind the lines. And after the homeless program, my perspective completely changed, and I realized that instead of material help, I realized that human care and human words and human kindness is so much more important than just giving materials.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's one question about literature. Once again, I read a lot of books about hers. Saying nothing sometimes says the most. Saying nothing sometimes says the most. What does it mean?
I think it was a very big core about my speech, because in my speech I once said that simply hugging and simply listening showed that I really cared. And to be frank, maybe there were words or advice that I could give to these people, but I think listening and showing that I accept them as they are is what really mattered. And I think that quote really signifies that.
Okay, speech is one thing, but action is another.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for opening the doors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayashi and Ms. Inoue. Please go back to your seats.